Toyota is the number one car brand in the world for the sixth year in a row. They're an automaker that routinely makes lists for the most reliable on the planet, and there is a legitimate argument to make that this is the only category an automaker should care about ranking in, because the goal of a car should, theoretically, be to offer dependable function without constant turnover due to lousy engineering. But then, as anybody who loves cars knows, cars are about way more than just reliability. And when we look at the big picture, well, Toyota might just be the most stagnant car brand in the world. And I know, that's a wild thing to say considering the channel you're currently watching, and the fact that they're still the largest automaker globally by volume. But there does seem to be a sort of friction within the brand, and the latest shakeup to their corporate structure has taken the auto industry by surprise, and not for the best reasons. Has Toyota lost its way? Is this 4D chess? Or can the world's largest auto brand only succeed by staying the same?
Roman report at the end of the month, and I make what I want when I feel like discussing cars.
On February 6th, it was announced that Toyota CEO Koji Sato would be stepping down after just 3 years, with finance chief Kenta Kon taking over the position on April Fool's Day, which is fitting if for no other reason than that it seems like a practical joke to get rid of a CEO who was the former head of Lexus, an avowed car guy with extensive experience in product development, who was selected as CEO by Chairman Akio Toyoda himself. And to do it in favor of essentially a finance guy, I suppose in Khan's defense, he has worked his way up from the bottom. I mean, for crying out loud, he was Akio Toyoda's secretary from 2009 to 2017. The man put in work climbing this corporate ladder. But if Sato wanted to step down, you'd think the choice would be a guy with the kind of engineering forward principles that Toyota has consistently projected as an identity. But putting a finance guy in charge suggests that the company believes their path forward isn't through greater innovation within their own product line, but through essentially playing the finance game better than anybody else. Cutting costs, finding new revenue streams, that sort of thing. After all, you don't put a finance guy in charge when you plan to spend more money. And in this sense, I kinda get it, because why fix what isn't broken? Sure, people might say the brand is stagnant, that they never change, but they're still number one, and they still rank high in overall customer satisfaction. So why should they do anything differently? And yeah, that's all true. Yet while there are ways in which this approach has put Toyota on top, there are also ways in which being the most stagnant auto brand on earth can do real damage in the long run. So let's talk about the ways Toyota is stagnating, and I guess I'll start with the most obvious one. The 70 Series Land Cruiser has been around with the same basic ladder frame platform since 1984. It's literally a year older than I am, and I have gray hairs. Now, while the platform is not identical, since Toyota has obviously made tweaks to modernize it and keep it compliant and all that, the general architecture has more or less carried over. And in some ways, this is great for Toyota because of what it means for the margins. This car is still in demand, and they aren't having to pay out the wazoo for constant model year changes. And its longevity helps sell the narrative of a Toyota being functionally indestructible. But the problem is that it also paints a narrative that your cars are outdated and your company is risk-averse. Case in point, look at the 4Runner. The 6th generation was introduced in 2024, and this was because it took the 5th gen longer to retire than a high school principal who has nothing going on outside of threatening to cancel prom. The 1st generation was in 1983, the 2nd gen was in 1989, 3rd gen 1995, 4th gen 2002, 5th gen 2009, 6th gen 2024. Notice the pattern? The first two generations ran for 6 years. The third and fourth generations ran for 7. The fifth? It ran for 15 years! Entire console and smartphone generations passed in that time frame, and the whole time the Forerunner is on the same platform. It'd be like if Apple only just upgraded now from the iPod Shuffle. And it doesn't stop there, because overseas, the Toyota Hilux has been running on the same IMV platform for 20 years. And you could get even more granular here, because the current XV80 generation of the Toyota Camry shares the same platform architecture as the XV70, which is the same platform architecture used in the most recent 2 generations of the RAV4. And in both cases, they've been in use as long or longer than all but the most recent Forerunner platform, because Toyota feels the way about change the way a bored husband feels about cleaning. Do it a little bit at a time, on my time. Now, I get why it makes sense to do this, beyond the obvious cost benefits and how much quicker this approach will get you to market. In a vacuum, stagnation is bad, but in context, it tells people that gimmicks and novelties aren't the draw here because we're confident enough in what we make to hardly touch our cars from one year to the next. You can trust us. And in that way, Toyota is the comfort food of the auto industry. Because even after they stop being the first choice that immediately springs to mind among the hungry, they still succeed because they're a choice that a hungry yet indecisive stomach could always go for. But it precludes current Toyotas from being cars you ever really feel excited to drive, because when you do, something feels off. The 6th generation Forerunner was introduced in 2024, and it marked a substantial departure from the 5th gen that preceded it, because it was now running on the Toyota New Global Architecture platform. Now, despite the name, this isn't entirely new. It's been around for over a decade, but in recent years we've seen it being implemented to mixed results. On the one hand, you could argue this is a structural and manufacturing innovation. Toyota certainly has. It's basically a system that declutters the number of platforms they would use across their inventory and distill it all down to just 5. This allows for standardization of parts and cross-compatibility between various models, which is actually really cool. But the problem here is that cars built on these platforms risk feeling, I don't really know how to put it except to kind of say templated. In itself, that's not really a bad thing if the template is good, but for a brand that has often prided itself on refinement, you can't really get Rembrandt when you're painting by number. As noted in a 2024 article for The Autopian, the Land Cruiser, the Tacoma, and the Forerunner have the same engine and transmission, while the Tundra and Sequoia adopted the same basic frame and suspension architecture as those 3 vehicles. So what's really compelling people to choose one over the other? Is there a meaningful difference beyond body styles, or are we just getting Malibu Stacy with different hats on? Even from a marketing standpoint, it feels like there's a risk of some of these cars cutting in on each other's territory. Then again, that's hardly the only risk. In fact, there's the larger problem that standardizing a platform risks standardizing problems. Just this month, Toyota recalled over 141,000 Priuses, Prius Primes, and Prius plug-in hybrids, due to an issue where water can enter the rear door switch and cause a short circuit that could allow the rear door to open unexpectedly. Meanwhile, a class action lawsuit against Toyota over their UA80 8-speed automatic transmission has now reached federal court, with complainants alleging that these transmissions suffer gear slippage, fluid leaks, loss of power, and that's if they even engage in the first place. Now, this is the third class action lawsuit over this transmission to make it to federal court. And that's before even getting into smaller complaints over the quality of interior materials and other basic concerns about Toyotas don't really feel like Toyotas anymore. Basically, whether or not it's true that standards are slipping at Toyota, it does seem like the perception has taken hold. And that hurts Toyota more than similar screw-ups hurt, say, Stellantis, because Stellantis didn't build their reputation around this aura of being indestructible. And I know, no car is indestructible, but the reputation Toyota has built is probably as close as any automaker is ever going to get. At least in the current clown shoe operation landscape of the modern auto industry. Either way, when Toyota screws up, that's figurative paint protection film peeling off of the otherwise pristine finish of their reputation. Nissan can have lousy CVTs because nobody expects better at this point. But for Toyota, screw-ups cause real reputational damage because people start to question if they've been misplacing their trust. I can only speak for myself, but I've certainly been far less impressed with recent Toyotas than stuff from, say, 20 years ago, maybe 15 years ago. I mean, I didn't really like that 2010 Prius, but I think that model year is just cursed for me. In the abstract, I guess it's easier for a company to make something that they know will succeed, rather than take another wild swing on something like a Lexus LFA that isn't going to make money but proves to the world that you've still got your fastball. But then, is this corporate approach even recent? Because I'm not sure it is. And this is a case where I kind of wish I knew somebody who's owned a bunch of Toyotas over his lifetime and knows them better than I do. Wait a minute.
Regular talk from a regular dude with irregular views when it comes to discussing cars.
The crazy experimental era of Toyota began in 1984 and ended in 2003. And those are the years when the MR2 was made. And I'm using that car as a benchmark to make a point about how Toyota has changed over the years. They used to be this crazy innovator that took wild ideas and made them work. Not only made them work, but made them more reliable than any other manufacturer. And here's the thing, they were doing it at a loss. They were also doing it at the same time. They were making amazing, amazing pickup trucks. But then something happened in 2003. They stopped. They stopped innovating. They stopped deciding that let's have a mid-engine sports car. We're going to make the poor man's Ferrari, and we're going to make it better than Ferrari. We're going to make it better than anybody. You're going to be able to take this car and drive it normally, because most of the parts in here are still stuff from a Corolla. Mazda couldn't do that. Oh, they did that with the MX-5, but could they do that with the rotaries? Nope. So, they stopped the MR2. And when they did, they weren't really the same. The Supra was gone. The Celica, that existed. The Celica GTS, the Matrix XRS, sure they were there, but Toyota changed their ethos. To understand Toyota is to understand Muhammad Ali. I know this sounds like a stretch, but come with me on this. In the beginning, Muhammad Ali was fast, faster than anybody. He just didn't get hit. It was similar to Mayweather. He used to brag about how beautiful he was, and how, of course, there was no one greater, and there was no one greater. But then there was the 3-year break. Afterwards, Muhammad Ali developed the rope-a-dope technique. That's where you hang back on the ropes, you cover up, and you just dodge, and you just absorb the other person's attacks. And you sit there and you download and you wait, and you wait, and you wait for the other person to get tired. That's what Toyota started doing in the 2000s. They weren't innovating anymore. They were just back here waiting for the other manufacturers to take chances with stuff, trucks, 4x4s, not really sports cars, small sporty hatchbacks. They're just sitting back there waiting for other manufacturers like Honda, the up-and-coming Hyundai, Kia, Ford. Let them make all the mistakes. You're going to wait and you're going to wait and you're going to wait and you're going to wait. And then you're going to come in. And then you're going to come in. But they did it very, well, they were just plain old boring. Take, for instance, the Fiesta ST and the Focus ST and the Focus RS. And finally, when the Honda Civic Type R came to the United States, Toyota didn't do anything. They just waited. They waited and waited and waited, and then they came out with the GR Corolla. Okay, that is some Toyota weirdness. A 3-cylinder turbo that makes 300 horsepower. Where were you 5 years ago with something like this? You saw the beginnings of it in the 2000s while the MR2 still existed, the third gen. They came out with the Tundra, and it was no joke that the Tundra was made to be an F-150. Looked just like it. V8, similar displacement, but everything was better. Had the beautiful 2UZ V8. They gave people exactly what they wanted. Did they give them fun? Well, that was going out the window. Toyota now is a wait-and-see company. You notice something else? Did Toyota come out with an EV? No. Oh, the BZ4X? Okay. The thing they did with Subaru? Fine. They didn't want to do that. The last bit of Toyota innovation, in my opinion, is a little bit misguided. They wanted to do hydrogen fuel cells. They kept pushing it in their home market. But out here in the US, and North America, Canada, Mexico, nah. Nope. They're very, very good at making hybrids, but they've decided that they're going to let other people take risks with EVs. Toyota is a wait-and-see company. I, of course, wish they were innovating, but right now they're going to do a combination of whatever the public wants, usually 3 years after the interest has peaked. They'll do fine, but as one of the executives said, I find it frustrating that no one really buys Toyotas new if they can help it. They're great used cars, but not really good new cars. Then again, Toyota doesn't really have to build hype anymore. There's no such thing as sales events or incentives at dealerships. They're still sailing on the reputation that they've built since 1984 and all the way through the 90s and into the 2000s. Are they getting lazy? Well, I don't know. It's hard to tell when all the manufacturers are struggling with lower quality, higher production costs, and the inevitable end-shitification that may come with Chinese manufacturers. But I think Toyota will find their way, and maybe they'll start innovating again.
Now, to follow up on Brian's point, Toyota is a wait-and-see company. And whether or not we've truly established the case here, I do think it is by design. But I think the thing we've been overlooking here is why they would choose an approach that minimizes their market leader heritage. I've been operating under the assumption that Toyota taking fewer risks is about just keeping business steady, because business, generally speaking, is good. Except recent reports suggest that there are financial threats to Toyota's market dominance that they need a finance guy to help them deal with. Reporting on the CES 2026 Tech Conference, Digitimes Asia correspondents would note that Toyota, quote, plans to adopt a more reactive market follower posture, citing steep US tariffs of 15% to 25% on imported vehicles. Roughly 23% of Toyota's US sales are supplied by vehicles imported from Japan, which face a 15% tariff. Another 28% are produced in Mexico and Canada. Supply chains that once underpinned Toyota's growth have now become direct targets of trade penalties, sharply narrowing the company's margin for maneuver. End quote. So in this sense, Kenta Kon's appointment makes all the sense in the world, even if keeping the brand on a figurative treadmill doesn't sound like the direction anybody wants to see Toyota going in. Then again, even when they are displaying forward thinking, it's sort of misplaced. Because, for instance, the new RAV4, okay? It's the first to utilize Toyota's new Arene software platform. A development that seems intended to make Toyota competitive in the automotive tech space. Except it kinda hasn't, with critics of the software stating that it's pretty outdated by the standards of automotive software platforms, since it only manages infotainment functions and advanced driver assistance systems, rather than actual vehicle functions themselves. For what it's worth, the Arene platform was co-developed by the company's mobility technology division, Woven by Toyota. Kenta Kon is on the board of directors for this division, which Reuters recently described as being, quote, tasked with deriving fresh revenue streams that go beyond car sales, end quote. Now, I'm not going to say this means subscriptions for previously standard features or running ads in your car like some automakers are doing, but I will say that it likely involves Toyota putting resources in places unrelated to making cars better. For example, Kenta Kon is also among the directors of Toyota's real estate wing, which has been spearheading the buyout of Toyota's own forklift venture. Will these make Toyota money? Absolutely. Will they pull focus from things like competitive offerings in the EV space? That remains to be seen. While Toyota does have the new CHR EV and the upcoming Highlander EV to place them into the EV SUV market, it was reported last year that they pushed back the manufacture of their next US-built EV SUV to 2028, a year later than anticipated. And this sort of links back to the CES 2026 reporting, which noted that 2026 is going to be kind of a defensive year for Toyota, focused less on drastic shifts and more about just keeping things relatively stable. But this all just feels like they're lagging behind in the name of fiscal responsibility, because innovation means risk, and risk can hurt the bottom line. And I don't really know that this mentality is going to change under Kon. At the press conference announcing his appointment, Kon was asked how his leadership style would differ from Akio Toyoda's and Koji Sato's car guy approaches, to which he would answer, quote, I like cars too, but I am a finance guy now. I am extremely particular about the money and the earning power needed to ensure cars are designed, engineered, and manufactured properly, and that sufficient investments to do so are made. End quote. Maybe stagnation is the point, and always has been. Maybe it always will be. That's how you stay number one. The old adage is that you've got to spend money to make money, but the way to continue making money is by finding innovative ways not to spend it. And look, Toyota is going to be fine. This isn't about saying Toyota's bad or Toyota is doing it all wrong and only we know how to fix it, because we don't. Toyotas don't really feel like Toyotas anymore, but it's not like they can just go back to 90s engineering because the economies of scale are different now. But all of this is more of a recognition that Toyota has changed and saying, hey, we get it. We get why you're doing this, Toyota, and why you feel you have to. But you're better than this. You know, I miss the older Toyota of the Serra and the MR2, or even the 99 Corolla, the second-gen RAV4, the third-gen 4Runner. Back when Toyota was better at walking that razor-thin line between being timeless and feeling outdated. I still think, on the whole, Toyota builds good cars. They still achieve a quality you can virtually set your watch to. but they also lack that obnoxious attention to detail, that over-engineered passion that gave Toyota so much character in its best years, when less was still more because more is what they left you wanting. And honestly, I'm not sure how Toyota gets that back without abandoning some of the very changes that have made them as successful as they've been the last 6 years. Maybe Toyota's stagnation is their own way of innovating, because it shows the auto industry that the goodwill and the reputation that derives from consistency can sometimes carry you a lot farther than simple change ever could. But what do you think? Has Toyota quality slipped? Why are they stagnant? Are they even stagnant at all? I want to know your thoughts. Let's talk it out. Positive, negative, I want to hear your opinions. Keep an eye out for me in the comments. My screen name is Limited Time Roman. Please leave a like, share the video, subscribe to our channel, and make sure you've tapped the bell icon so you're notified for every new video. But if you want to get these videos early and ad-free along with other exclusive content, and support our ability to even make these videos in the first place, because YouTube is wildly inconsistent about even showing people our videos, then join us over on Patreon for just $1. Merch links are in the description, and remember, for every order placed on our Fourth Wall store, I'll send you a personalized thank you video. You can even tell me what to say, provided it's nothing that's going to get me canceled. Although I really don't think I'm important enough to cancel, but whatever, thank you. That's all I gotta say. Truly, thank you so much for watching, and have an outstanding rest of your week.